Welcome to the deep dive. We've got a really fascinating set of sources you've sent us this week, all centered on one very intense ideological struggle.
It's a recent Tamil political seminar, and it's dedicated to, well, to completely redefining the legacies of two absolute giants in Tamil history.
Right. We're talking about the poet Mahakavi Bharathi, or Bharathiyar, and E.V Ramasamy, known to everyone as Periyar.
And this deep dive, it isn't really about looking at the established historical consensus. It's about extracting the specific, very modern political arguments from this one seminar.
They had a clear objective, didn't they?
Oh, absolutely. They stated it right up front. Their goal was to establish, and this is a quote, which is the true identity and which is the inflated image.
And the claims they make they're incredibly sharp. The whole narrative from the seminar frames Bharathi as the social justice poet.
The true revolutionary, the one who, actually put his words into action.
And then on the other side, you have EVR. He's just consistently targeted in these sources as an opportunist.
They call him a fraudulent image, and, the most extreme claim is that he was a traitor to the Tamil race.
So today, we're diving into that specific, really uncompromising narrative, and we're just going to extract the evidence they presented. And we have to be clear, we are strictly reporting on the content of this seminar. We're not endorsing any of these views.
It sounds like they weren't just criticizing him. They were attempting a complete character assassination.
Yeah.
And they started with the absolute cornerstone of Tamil identity language.
Okay, let's unpack this first segment, the language question. The transcript immediately positions Bharathi as this, undisputed ultimate devotee of Tamil.
They do. They use verses that are almost like scripture in the region to make their case.
That's the national stuff.
Exactly. They leaned very heavily on two specific pieces of his poetry. The first one being Yamarinda Mozigalile Tamil Mozipol in Havathu Engam Kanum.
Which means?
It translates to, among the languages I know, none is as sweet as Tamil. Just a pure, simple devotion.
And then there's the other one, which is arguably even more powerful because it ties language directly to patriotism. Senthamiz nadanam patinail inba thain vandu payudu katanle.
Such an emotional line. It means when the name of the beautiful Tamil country is spoken, sweet honey flows into the ears.
So the argument from the seminar is pretty clear.
Oh.
For Bharathi, the language was this visceral personal pleasure. It was national identity itself.
And then, bam, they pivot so sharply to EVR, and they just unload claims that portray him as actively hostile to the Tamil language, a language hypocrite, as they put it.
What kind of claims are we talking about?
Well, the documents they cited claim EVR, called Tamil Katumirandi Mozi.
That's barbaric language.
A barbaric language,
Okay.
yes. They even allege he called it Tamil Sanyan, which it's like calling the language a curse. And they highlighted a question he apparently asked.
What prominence does Tamil have in the global arena?
Exactly. The implication being he had a fundamental lack of respect for his relevance in the modern world.
Yeah. And here's where the narrative of scorn gets incredibly specific. The presenters cited this alleged piece of advice from EVR.
This was pretty shocking.
It was, speak only in English with your wife, children, and even housekeepers. Abandon this Tamil madness and try to live like human beings.
Wow. So the picture they're painting is of someone who wanted to actively downgrade his own language in favor of, English practicality?
That's the argument. And what's fascinating is how the seminar then uses history against the current pro-EVR movements. They point to what they call a historical contradiction.
Right, from within the Dravidian movement itself.
They cite EVR's own publication, Kudirasu, back in 1925, and they claim that he actually published Bharathi songs in it.
Which would seem to, completely contradict his later supposed scorn for the language. It's a powerful piece of evidence, if true.
And they didn't stop there. They noted that other highly respected Dravidian leaders also praised Bharathi. This was to undermine the idea that Bharathi was just some Sanatani, a traditionalist.
While EVR was the only progressive, right? They were trying to show that that's a modern invention.
Yes, and the evidence was just stacked up. They brought up Anna, who apparently called Bharathi the people's poet.
For making Tamil poetry accessible to the common person again.
They mentioned Karunanidhi, too, who wrote admiringly about him as the Mundasu Kavanyar, the turbaned poet.
And maybe the most telling citation, the one they really hammered home, was from a book by K.A. and Balgan.
What did that one say?
The very first essay in that book reportedly called Bharathi the eyes for the blind. And crucially, it was specifically referring to Dravidian groups.
So the seminar's conclusion is that the Dravidian movement's own founders celebrated Bharati, making the current attacks on him, in their view, just historical revisionism.
And that intense ideological contrast, it leads us straight into the next major theme: social justice, caste, and political action.
This is where the seminar presenters seemed really determined to cement Bharati as the true Samatuva Patan, the father of equality.
His anti-caste stance, according to these sources, was totally uncompromising.
They brought up those universally recognized lines, Saphagol Ileadi Papa.
There are no castes, child.
Just so direct. And that other powerful statement about the neutrality of birth, Vedya Rayanam Andri Veru Kulathavarayanam Andri.
Meaning, whether you're a Brahmin or from any other caste, you are one. It's a statement of absolute human unity.
But they didn't just stick to his poetry. They argued he moved the whole discourse from just national equality to international racial equality. And they used a very unusual anecdote to prove it.
The one about the cat.
The one about the cat. It's such a unique way to bridge that gap between, big philosophy and everyday life.
It really is. The speaker claimed Bharati took in a pregnant cat, and after the kittens were born, he wrote a poem.
And the point of the poem was?
That all the kittens, it didn't matter what color they are of the same quality. And he directly connected that simple observation to the need for racial and caste equality among people.
So the argument is that his philosophy wasn't just something he wrote about. It was something he lived, moment to moment.
Exactly. And then, in stark contrast, they level these just devastating claims against EVR. They present him as the ultimate caste hypocrite,
arguing his actions actually promoted caste hierarchy, even with all his anti-Brahmin rhetoric.
Yeah, the transcript details some very specific political contradictions. They claim EVR supported Brahmin candidates like C. Balasubramaniam in 1957.
And R. Venkataraman, too.
Oh, and he did this against non-Brahmin candidates like Anna. But the most serious claims, I think, focused on his alleged definitions of the caste structure itself.
What were those definitions specifically?
The speakers quoted EVR classifying Sudharan, or Shudra, as being non-Muslim, non-Christian, non-Adi Dravidar.
So by creating that kind of classification, what was the seminar arguing he was doing?
They argued he was deliberately setting up a new hierarchy, one where he placed his own followers above other marginalized groups. It wasn't about tearing down the whole system.
And they underscored this point with what the seminar claimed EVR saw as his community's real enemies.
This was a key piece of evidence for them. They cited an article by EVR called Enadu Puranthanal Sethi, his birthday message, from his paper Viduthalai.
September 18th, 1963.
That's the one. And in it, he allegedly lists the 4 enemies of his community. You have Brahmins, Muslims, Christians, and then, crucially, Namil Kilana Makal.
Which translates to people lower than us.
People lower than us. That detail was used by the seminar to argue that his struggle was never truly for universal equality. It was for the advancement of one group over others.
And finally, on this topic, they bring up the issue of violence and inaction. They claimed EVR failed to condemn the horrific Kilvanmani massacre in 1968.
Where 44 people died, a terrible caste-based atrocity.
And the reason they alleged for his inaction.
The perpetrator, a man named Gopalakrishna Naidu, belonged to a caste group that was aligned with the Dravidian movement. The implication is that his silence was politically motivated.
Let's transition to the third segment then, the battle over women's liberation. And the divide here is, if anything, even sharper. Bharati is once again painted as this radical visionary.
Absolutely. Arguing for ideas that were so far ahead of his time, especially in the early 20th century.
They highlighted his calls for women to have Nimirda Nanadayum Nurkanda Parvim.
An upright gait and a straight gaze. I mean, that's not just poetry. It's a literal demand for women to carry themselves with self-respect and confidence, to look the world in the eye.
He also argued for concrete political rights, the right to rule, the right to make laws, property ownership.
All radical for the time. But the most radical quote they pulled from his writing, I think, was about marriage.
I agree. The idea that a married woman has the right to have friendships with a man other than her husband if she wishes.
And that marriage shouldn't restrict that right? I mean, that's a truly revolutionary idea for that era.
And they contrasted that intellectual radicalism with his alleged personal life. They claimed he showed this genuine reciprocal respect for his wife, Chalama,
calling her his Anbu Kadali, his beloved lover, even though it was an arranged marriage. The point being, again, that he lived his ideals.
And then, on the flip side, the seminar just tears into EVR's approach, characterizing his supposed solutions for women's issues as, well, destructive.
They focused on his alleged suggestion for women's enslavement, carpaia erutha visu.
Which is the
Sure.
shocking idea to literally cut off the uterus, to have a hysterotomy.
Yes. The speakers at the seminar explicitly labeled this as an idea that was destructive to humanity. They even framed it as a sort of precursor to modern debates about, enjoyment without responsibility.
And in line with the last segment, they attacked EVR's private life for what they saw as hypocrisy.
They claimed there's a letter written after his first wife Nagamai's death, where her loss is described merely as the loss of a slave.
That's a brutal accusation.
It is. And to back up, they also cited a widely circulated photograph. It allegedly shows EVR seated, while his later wife, Maniamai, is pouring water for him to wash his hands after a meal.
So they're accusing him of demanding traditional domestic servitude from his own wife while preaching equality in public.
That's the charge they laid out. A complete disconnect between his public persona and his private life. Okay, so segment 4. This is where the speakers really aimed for the knockout punch. They framed it as revolutionary versus opportunist and got into nationalism and finance.
This is where they tried to cement Bharathi's image as the genuine, pure revolutionary.
Right. They cited British documents, actual colonial records that apparently list Bharathi as a dangerous person.
Why?
For waging ideological warfare against the colonizers. For them, this was proof of his serious anti-colonial credentials.
And they also brought up that personal anecdote to emphasize his compassion.
The one about the rickshaw puller. That Bharathi, despite being poor himself, allegedly gave all the money he had to a rickshaw puller out of just sheer human kindness.
The argument being his revolutionary spirit was pure, fueled by ideology, not by personal gain.
Which brings us to the intense accusations they leveled against EVR, which they used to label him a Paratukaran.
And that term means a fraudulent person, a swindler.
Essentially, yes, a fraud. On the anti-nationalism front, the speakers claimed EVR actually preferred that the Madras presidency continue to be ruled by the English Queen rather than achieve independence.
And the accusations also got very deep into his finances.
Oh, very deep. The transcript highlights the claim that EVR accumulated 125 crore in old valuation. I mean, a staggering sum for that era.
And they alleged he transferred party property, like the Viduthalai Press, into his wife's name after they got married.
And this is where the seminar focused on what are probably the most politically sensitive claims today. EVR's alleged anti-minority sentiment, specifically targeting the Muslim community.
They cited multiple editorials from his own paper, Viduthalai.
And again, we're just extracting these specific and sometimes shocking claims from the source without any endorsement.
Of course. So the speakers claimed EVR criticized giving concessions, reservations to Muslims and Brahmins,
asserting that it harmed the majority population. But then it got much more personal. They specifically quoted him making derogatory statements about Muslim women,
claiming they stay home in Purda and live without physical labor, surviving on free rice.
It's an incredibly inflammatory quote.
Yeah.
And in another intense claim, from an editorial dated April 23, 1964, he was quoted asking why Muslims don't just go to Pakistan or Afghanistan or Bangladesh,
stating they have no business here.
No business here. And on top of that, the transcript cites him demanding that the Indian government ban the Muslim League immediately after partition. He allegedly called it a Pakistan party in an editorial from January 3, 1962.
So the seminar speakers are clearly using his own alleged words to frame him as fundamentally divisive, as someone opposed to a unified, multi-religious Tamil nation.
Exactly. And as a final act, the seminar took on two major historical defenses that are often cited in support of EVR and tried to just systematically refute them.
What was the first one?
The first was the claim that EVR funded V.O. Chidambaram Pillai's, or VOC's, Swadeshi ship, that he helped fund the first Indian shipping company.
A very popular story.
A very popular story, which the speakers outright rejected. They said the idea that EVR gave 5,000 INR, or even 35,000 INR collected, is false.
So what was their counterclaim? Who did they say funded it?
They claimed the majority of the funding actually came from a man named Fakir Muhammad Rather. He allegedly bought 1/5 of the shares for 2 lakh INR in 1906.
And they said VOC himself acknowledged this.
In his autobiography, yes, that was their evidence. The final counterpoint was about the naming of the state itself.
Tamil Nadu.
Right. They acknowledged that Anna was the one who formally passed the resolution. They didn't dispute that. But they insisted the core idea came from Bharathi first.
In his poem, Senthamis Nadanam.
That's the one. And they argued that the actual political demand for the name change wasn't catalyzed by EVR's movement. It was sparked by the fasting sacrifice of a man named Sankara.
So, in effect, the seminar's goal was to strip EVR of any credit for modern Tamil nationalism and give it entirely to others.
So to synthesize this whole thing, the central narrative established by this seminar, their entire purpose, was the complete, detailed refutation of what they call EVR's inflated image.
And to replace it with the enduring, quote, true legacy of Bharati.
Exactly. They argue Bharati was the genuine revolutionary, the one who valued language, true equality, and stood for truth even when it cost him personally, while EVR, in their telling, was driven by opportunism.
They're challenging the very foundational political mythologies of Tamil Nadu.
They really are. And the core insight here, I think, is that attacking these historical icons is the most powerful way to try and redefine a modern political foundation.
The fact that such intense, evidence-based challenges using EVR's own alleged writings on caste, religion, and women are emerging right now just shows how fiercely the political landscape in Tamil Nadu is being re-examined.
And, we've seen how both figures are accused of hypocrisy on caste and gender by different camps referenced in this seminar. So it leaves you with a question. If knowledge is most valuable when it's understood and applied, what responsibility do we, as informed citizens, have when judging these historical figures whose complexities and the intense debates around them are still unfolding decades later?
Something for you to consider long after this deep dive is over.